chilling with the man, Dany Vambili. Some know as Dany V.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this man has such a huge accolade behind him. I couldn't list all of his accolades, the things he's done,
Wow.
the spaces he's been. But I the one thing I can say is that Dany has a lot of work in working with youth and young people. I remember we once went to a hashtag Imagine camp, and I was so jealous on how you were just moving that crowd of young people, of teenagers, man. And I really think it's quite a gift. Because I feel like I'm disconnected from Gen Zs and teenagers, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
But I wanted us to take the message that you shared this morning. You know, we had a beautiful message that you shared here at Radio Pulpit, and I wanted us to take that very same message and sort of package it for the young generation and how they can be challenged. Because I felt very challenged. I felt very challenged.
Thank you, Kevin.
So you were speaking about relationships, right? And how I think your message was primarily based on introspection, like looking inside of you. But I'm going to leave you to introduce it and explain what it's about, and I'll sort of probe you with questions as we go along.
Wow. No, first of all, thank you for having me, Given. I mean,
Awesome.
It's always a pleasure. And wow, so this morning we really were talking, even it had a few layers, right?
Yeah.
First thing is really about understanding that you have to grow. You have to grow. A lot of us are still being held back. Sometimes, let's say maybe in grade 1, a teacher said you were dumb.
Yeah.
You know, and now...
Which happened to me, mind you.
Did it happen to you?
In grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, I had a teacher who would constantly come into the classroom and he would hold a book like this and go, give it. I guarantee you'll never make it in life. I promise you.
No ways.
And I'll probably share later like where he's at right now, which I think will feed into your point. But yeah, you can continue just...
Yeah, I mean, listen to such a traumatic experience where we've all had someone at some point in our lives where they were speaking negativity over us. And sometimes it's light, sometimes it's very targeted. But if you hang on to that word and you allow that word to determine the outcome of your life, it becomes a problem. If every time you are, let's say you're making a decision on what you're going to study, but then in the back of your head you're saying, yeah, but Mrs. Van Wyk said I'm not so smart. So let me rather do 1, 2, 3 instead of what I'm passionate about. You know, at some point you'll find that you're being held back by words that maybe were spoken over, let's say, 10 seconds. Ha, Dany is dumb. And the whole class laughed.
Yes.
And for maybe the next 10 years, I'm walking around with that statement and being held back by it. You know, but the Dany of today is not that Dany. It's like you now Given, taking that, Given is whatever. And in your 20, I mean, how old are you now?
I'm 31 now.
31. In your age, at age 31, if you were still allowing those statements to determine who you are and to hold you back, to make you look at yourself through those lenses, my guy. Yes, we can blame the teacher, but when do we hold you accountable for not outgrowing what was said to you as a child? When do we question you and say, but Given, look, my guy, this thing was said to you 15 years ago. Can you let this thing go? Can you really not allow even the hurts, you know, because this thing can go from teacher to parents.
Yes.
You know, some of us have not had parents.
I really think those ones, the ones that are enforced by parents, are the worst.
Yes.
And I think sometimes, you know, you were talking about this beautiful concept, which we're not probably not going to get too deep into, but that trauma is passed through words.
Yes.
Like the stories you hear, the things people say,
Yes.
it's things they went through.
Yes.
I personally know a lot of people who it's their parents that have left them with the most trauma.
Yes.
Which now that trauma carries on to the relationships that they go to in life. So it's not just the teacher, it's not just the person during, I think we call it PE.
Yes.
Who tells you, you and that sport,
Yeah.
forget the ball, you go join this.
Yeah.
You don't swim, go do javelin, or you go be with those ones, because we all know people like you don't win here. It's not just that one. It's and I don't know. We'll probably get into it as well. But home,
Yes.
having to deal with it at home. For me that one. Yeah.
Look, home is a very dangerous place because home normalizes anything. Home can normalize the most obscene things, and you think it's normal. And this morning I asked everyone, like, if I said wake up at the normal time tomorrow, Saturday, what would that normal time be? And all I was establishing is normal for you is not normal for me.
Exactly.
And your normal, you said 11 o'clock on a Saturday. I was like, 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
But given, I'm going to use my parents, for example. So my mom, for those who don't know, I'm originally from the DRC. I was born there, raised in South Africa my whole life. So I'm a South African citizen. All I know is SA, but I was born in the Congo. So while in South Africa, when my mom would be stopped by cops, just traffic cops, my mom would always panic. Like she would panic to a point of, no, just give them something. And I'm like, Mom, but you've done nothing wrong. What's happening? And I never caught it until we started looking into this concept of trauma. And we realized that when my mom sees a cop, she's seeing a soldier. And the soldiers in the Congo could kill you. They could kill you and no one will say or do anything. So her interactions with cops were coming from a place of trauma. But guess what, Given? When I started driving, I had the same fear. When I started driving, whenever I would see cops, I'd be worried, I'd freak out. Meanwhile, I had the license, I had the license disc, nothing wrong with my car, citizenship, I'm not an illegal immigrant in any way or how. But I was walking in my mother's trauma and I didn't even know I was. I didn't even know I was. And it's only later when I asked myself, but why are you afraid? So now I'm the most friendly person to traffic cops because it's like I had to go from, hey man, these guys are just checking up.
Exactly.
There's nothing wrong. But I've had to accept that for my mom, because she's seen those guys murder, because she comes from a home where anything could happen in that interaction.
Yeah, exactly.
It's different for her. So there's a lot of people even now, their ideas of relationships, they might have never been in an abusive relationship in their life. But when they're speaking about relationship, it's abuse. It's abuse. It's abuse.
Exactly.
Why? Maybe the mom had been in an abusive relationship. And it could not even be that their own dad was the abusive person. But because the mom spoke about it all the time and actually didn't go and get healed, she's now passed on the abuse through her speech. She's now passed on the abuse through her speech. And a lot of us are carrying abuse that we never experienced, but we live in.
Imagine.
We actually live in abuses that we never went through.
That's so deep.
It's
That
scary.
is so deep. And I'm imagining right now that to sort of simplify it to a point where a person can look within themselves and say, one thing I learned, if you are in primary, if you're in high school, usually you don't see these things happening. And I feel like that's okay.
Yes.
I don't think we should expect it from someone in high school to be so emotionally intelligent that they can identify that, no, this is a trauma from my parents, and they have this because of where they come from. It really takes a certain level of maturity.
Yes.
And I think that's where counseling comes in, sitting down with an elder at church, someone who's responsible for the counseling, and then just sit with them and talk to them about things that are happening at home. And then they'll be able to identify for you. They might not burden you with it, but they'll be able to help you process that thing.
Yes.
But because I'm realizing that I've experienced such things since I was very young. Like, for example, just a basic example, my mother was raised by a very stiff-hand dad. So even their mom, my mom and her siblings, my grandmother, did not show much affection.
Yes.
My grandmother spent a lot of time coming home. She was a very hard-working woman, but the older she got, the more she spent a lot of time in bed, just sleeping, and that passed on to some of her children. And a lot of them didn't actually have a reason to go to bed after coming from work, But the thing that I'm actually pointing to a lot is the affection part.
Yes.
Because their mother never said, "I love you," because their mother never held them, because their mother never asked them, "How was your day?" And really tried to be very affectionate with them, because their father was even worse. They never built it upon themselves to be like that amongst each other. So then they passed it on to their kids. So myself and my cousins and my siblings, we don't have those conversations where we sit down and, we have long, a simple thing as, let's go out for a burger.
Sure.
Let's go and watch a movie. It's a challenge, and it's not because we don't love each other. It has not been normalized, like you mentioned.
Your normal is let's sleep.
Let's sleep. You make food, and then everyone just dishes up and goes and eats wherever they want to.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely, the onus is definitely on the parent to normalize healthy behaviors, healthy practices within the home, which, and we really, so here's the thing, the dilemma that I'm caught between right now, right?
All right.
We want to have a conversation that the youth can consume, and young people can take and apply and observe within their life that, okay, this is a trauma that my parent might have. You'll get to a certain age where you start identifying. My mother doesn't want to give or spend money because they come from a time when money was scarce, or for them there's a different relationship between them and money, or between them and food at home. There are some people who come from households where the parents just don't, when someone comes to visit, hey, cover the pots, put them away. And you take that as well. Yeah. So we obviously want to focus more on addressing that for young people, so that they can be equipped with knowing that, okay, this is what's happening. But obviously not up to a certain age, you'll be able to identify that. But now I'm also thinking of the parents.
Sure.
Sure. I'm thinking of the parents because they are victims of the circumstances they grew up in.
Yes. They're not going out to hurt you. It's like my mom wasn't trying to traumatize me with cops, but she herself, every adult was a child.
Ish. We forget that.
We forget that.
And
we forget that when they were children, they were also as unaware as we are as children.
Yes.
You get me? So someone is listening now, and maybe because of your exposure at school and the conversations of our generation, you're able to know more than your parent, right? Or to grasp, hey man, emotional intelligence. We don't have that in our home. What we have to do, and it's something my father-in-law actually said to us in his deathbed.
Okay.
He was very sick. He had cancer, and my wife and I were doing some of the stuff for him. And some of the things we were picking up, he just didn't file. He just didn't do,
Yeah.
And it was a bit frustrating. So my wife was really having like a frustrated moment. Like, but Dad, why didn't you do these things? And instead of him being upset or anything, he laughed. He just laughed and said, my children, let me teach you something.
Okay.
When do you know you've grown up? you know, and we're like, oh, well. Honestly, I thought when you're older, you know.
Yeah, I mean, duh.
You know. But he said, when you can learn from your parents' mistakes, you know, and then he just laughed, never explained himself. He was just like, guys, I made mistakes, and you can learn from it. You know, I can't go back in time and change it. So sometimes when we're picking up on areas where our parents went wrong, we can help them.
Yeah.
It's like my mom also was one of those hard people, but I started telling her I love you. And today that's normal. The first few times it was weird, like she looked at me like, what's going on with this child,
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
But today it's normal in my family for us to say I love you to each other. You know, so it's not only the parent that can initiate change in a family. Sometimes a child seeing that, hey man, this thing is missing in my parent.
That's powerful.
Let me initiate it to them.
Sure.
You know, it's almost like you are now the one reaching out to your parent in an area where they were deficient, you know, and emotional deficiency, especially in Africa. Africa is one of those few countries, not countries, continent. Yeah, sounded so American there. It's one of the few continents that shares a communal state of trauma.
Yes.
You get me? Other countries, let's say maybe what happened in Germany, in Germany didn't happen in France.
Yes.
Or what happened in France didn't happen in Italy.
Yeah.
But they're on the same continent.
Yes.
In Africa, the history of slavery, just like it hit all of us.
Yes.
And colonialism, there's only one country that wasn't colonized, it's Ethiopia.
Yeah.
So the rest of us are a very rare case of communal trauma. So we have to be aware that there will be areas where our parents did not even have the option to know that kind of love, that kind of compassion.
Yeah.
Well, because their parents were being broken down, or their great parents. So it's something that we now, as the younger generation, will have to reach back, and not from a place of pride, but of love and understanding that, hey, my parent didn't have this.
Exactly.
You know, so it's really deep, and we have to introspect and understand that. First of all, you can't excuse bad behavior.
True. Very, very true.
Something is
very
bad.
True.
I was speaking to someone this week who said, yeah, I used to own that I'm angry.
Yeah.
Like, yo, me, I'm short-tempered. You know, I'm a short-tempered guy.
Yeah.
But then he got married and he realized that I'm short-tempered wasn't working.
Oh.
You know, it won't work.
Exactly.
And you and I are both in relationships that are serious.
Yes.
Like, you have to develop and say, no, man. Getting angry, she's angry, I'm angry. No one is going to go anywhere. I have to change.
Exactly.
So don't own bad behavior and be like,
this is mine.
This is who I am.
Yeah.
No, it's not who you are. That could be the broken version of you. Doesn't mean it's you.
I really, really love this, hey, because I feel like now, if someone had told me this, you know, I think in primary, I didn't think or care about this.
Yeah.
In high school, it's when I started noticing some of these things, but it didn't matter as much. It was in varsity, when you start having conversations with some of your friends, that you realize that all of you share these common traumas because of the households you grew up in.
Yeah.
And that was like the difficult and challenging thing that I saw, right?
Yeah.
Where I was like, you know what, I'm now starting to find this an important conversation. And I feel like any young person, is whether in primary or high school, listening to this, they are being equipped with that enough information to be able to grant their parents grace.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
That's true.
Yeah. So you look at, some of our fathers have come from times of war.
Yes.
Some of them were in the army. Some of them
Yes.
have watched people being mutilated in front of them. Some of them had to fight during the apartheid time. Some of them were caught up in wars they didn't want to be caught up in, you know, and that hardens a person,
Yes.
you know, and I think it's up to us to then, first of all, show them grace, but like you mentioned, also challenge them by saying, Dad, I love you, or Mom, I love you.
Yeah.
I think the I love you to a dad comes better from a daughter than from a son, you know. But I think I love the fact that you're mentioning that there is power that we have to sort of mend the brokenness or help mend the brokenness to a certain extent. And also identifying it as well to say, oh, it must be this, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Stop. If you choose to not define what's happening in your home as normal, you can begin to question. You know, and maybe you're in a family where you're always fighting, you know, and you're the child. You have to ask yourself, why are we always fighting? You know, why are we always screaming at each other? Why are we always angry? Why don't we talk? And if you can identify that these things are not normal, then you can address them. You know, and then you can also be a light to those who are still walking in that thing.
Oh,
you know?
Yes. I love that.
I think young people need to understand something. Older people are not dumb. You know, they're not old school and outdated. They're just like you. They're human beings who've been through certain experiences and have not taken time to cope. Just because you're living through something doesn't mean you're dealing with it. You know, so the idea or the choice to deal is personal. You have to choose to face who you are, how you do things, what you've been exposed to, and also to get help. So if you're listening to us right now and you come from a family, and we're going to mention things, if you're coming from a family...
We're not name dropping.
No, not name dropping.
We're trauma dropping.
We're trauma dropping. If there's physical abuse in your house, now... a hiding is not physical abuse.
Yes.
But a hiding is not being punched in the face. If your parents physically fight, that's not right. If your parents fight in front of you, that's not right. Parents fight, but they should keep it away from the children. If your mother or your father share their marital problems with you, that's not right. Because that would not make you insecure. Because what can a child do when parents are fighting? There's literally nothing you can do. It's overburdening you as a child with things you can do nothing about. Because in the end of the day, the decision will be made by the parents. So if you come from those kinds of environments, those are not right. So first, you as the person in it, you need to know that, look, I need help. Maybe to process the emotions, maybe to speak to a counselor who can also now speak to your parents and say, look, keep this away from your child. It's not healthy because there's nothing the child can do after getting that information. So or alcohol abuse. If your parent is an alcoholic, if your parent is a drug addict, and when they are high or if your brother, I mean, in our country right now, there's a scourge that's happening where people are using things like nyaupe. So if you've got an older brother who's a nyaupe addict, who's coming and taking things from the house and selling it, and you guys don't feel safe, you are going through a certain level of trauma. So it will be good for you at this age to already get help. Now, when we say get help, oh man, people think, you saying I'm crazy, you know. There's no hope. Help? Why do I need help? And all we're saying is being emotionally healthy is important. If you're in those situations, you'll probably find that you don't have anyone you can talk to. You know, so now the emotions in you are maybe you're angry because you can't do nothing and you're watching your parent be beaten up, and now you're fighting with people at school. You get me? So the emotions you're feeling are being misdirected. But if you could go and speak to someone and tell them, I'm in this situation, maybe the counselor could give you steps and things you could do that helps you process that emotion, so it's not coming out in the wrong places. So we're not saying you know, like you're the worst case scenario. We're just saying, don't end up like the same parent. The parent you're seeing who's not emotional, who's not available, also started as a child. Also probably had a parent like yours, you know, but they didn't deal with themselves while they were still young.
Yeah, no, this is it's very, very good, right? I hope that it comes across as both to the parent, we do understand and we are not pointing fingers at you.
Yes.
We understand because we know what trauma does. I mean, there are some things. I was having a conversation with some colleagues and we were talking about buying a house, right? And how a lot of us don't actually, you know how people will often say that as soon as you make enough money, buy property. Make sure that you own a home. Then I was reading a book, and I know this might be a very complicated example to talk about something very basic, but I'll also use a very simple example. I was reading a book that was challenging that notion of why are you, it's actually not a good idea to advise everybody to buy a home, because for some people it makes sense not to own a home. Because if you're a person who likes traveling, if you're a young person and you currently are invested in something else, it actually makes better sense for you not to own a home. I'm not going to be able to get into the details of it.
But I grasp what you're saying.
Exactly. Like there are instances where it makes better sense for a person. So here's actually a good example. Here's why. The problem with owning a home is the fact that it's a fixed asset. You can't move it. You can't take a home and move it to another location. And the one thing we know about locations is they don't stay the same forever. If this area was the hype, had a lot of hype at the time when you bought, it had the best malls, it had the best vibes and grooves. 10 years down the line, no one knows what's going to happen. Another thing is we don't know what our president's going to decide tomorrow. That could either raise or drop the market value. We don't know what strike is going to happen, what pandemic is going to happen. So the problem with owning property is because that it's a fixed asset that stays and takes 7 months to sell. Right? Roughly. Whereas if you look at stocks, for example, they're very flexible. When you buy stocks, you can buy in different countries. Doesn't matter what your president decides. You can always just take your assets from this area and sell them and buy here. You know, or just wait it out. You know, you can have money here, and here. If you instead of investing in property, invest in REITs, which is also property, but a share of property, REITs investments, you're actually more flexible and you're unlikely to be just hit. And then all of your income is gone. My mom is in a situation where the neighborhood we used to live in was the best, right? Like I grew up, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but where I lived, people were like, you area. From there? You understand what I mean? But now the area is changing. The potholes are incredible. All of the people who had money have moved, have sold. And now the people that are from the townships are starting to have their parties around that area, you know, and walking back home. So the whole situation has changed. And that's the thing with property. Now you're stuck with it. You know what I mean?
That's true.
So the point is also similar to how being raised in a home where gravy is made with tomatoes, and you have to have tomatoes in the house. To cook. You know, you just have to have tomatoes in the house, and you've never really asked yourself, like, do I really need to have tomatoes in the house? Do I really need to have no soup? Right? There are people who make gravy without that. It's just water, spices, and whatever vegetables they chose to cut for that day. Mushrooms. You know what I mean? We don't realize that we learned these things, they were normalized, and we've believed that we can't not have them in the fridge. Some things you don't even ask yourself, do I really need to have this in my fridge?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
I hear you. I hear you, Gibbon.
And then you find a friend cooking with parsley and you're like, what is
parsley? What are these leaves?
Yes.